It's the final days of 2022 and I have not been uploading as much as I should have been. So here's a big one. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this edited before it ticks over into 2023, so it may be the start of 2023 by the time you're watching this, in which case I'm sorry for the Christmas tree. Anyway, it's time to do a roundup of the best and worst of the year, the VGT Awards, if you will. The true north of video game awards, the real best and worst of the year. Why, you ask? Why is this the real deal? Well, because the voting pool isn't polluted by corporate bias and the meme-chasing public. In fact, there is no voting pool at all. It's just me, just my opinion, and that is the only opinion that matters. I started this channel in 2020, which was ideal really, because 2020 was just such a great year for video games. All the shit that the rest of the world was going through in 2020, but video games just seemed to be going from strength to strength. Final Fantasy VII Remake, Ori and the Will of the Wisps, The Last of Us Part 2, Animal Crossing, fucking Tony Hawk's Pro Skater Remake, Among Us, Fall Guys, Hades, the list just went on and on. And then 2021 rolled around and 2021 was fucking rough. I mean, look, that's not to disrespect the handful of decent games that did drop in 2021, but really, there certainly wasn't a whole lot to go on, especially when it came down to big blockbuster titles. These were the best two things to happen in 2021, and yeah, they were both really good, but one of them was a couch co-op game, and the other one wasn't even the best game in its own series. On the flip side though, out there in the big wide world, things were actually starting to look kind of positive. Positive at least by the standards of a world recovering from a seismic pandemic anyway. So here we are, it's 2022. What did you have in store for us? Well, World War IV is on the horizon. Russia are strangling the flow of Western oil resources. Energy prices are through the fucking roof. Inflation is crushing the working class and wages are not rising to meet it. Global warming is causing untold catastrophes. Even the World Cup was fucked up this year. How the fuck do you fuck up the World Cup? 2022 generally is a fucking shit show. However, if there's one thing that I've learned in the past 2 years, it's that when the real world is in literal ruin, video games fucking excel. And this year has driven home that theory. 2022 has been a fucking whirlwind, both in real life and in terms of video games. But let's be honest, there are three things that stood out this year above the rest. This, and this.
Mr. Depp was trying to urinate in the foyer, wasn't he?
No.
Mr. Depp had his penis out of his...
Seriously though, 2022 has been packed with some really, really amazing gaming experiences, and we're going to take a look at those. But along with the smooth comes the rough. And this year we have a brand new selection box of the bad. The placid, boring experiences that were a drag, hyped up experiences that promised so much more than they turned out to be, and to no one's surprise, plenty more soulless pay-to-win experiences, microtransactions galore, and questionable video game rollouts and franchises being turned into shameless corporate greed machines, all of which serve only to drain the pockets of parents who don't know that their credit card is linked to their child's console account. So yeah, 2022 has had its gaming ups and its gaming downs, and we're going to get into it all right now. I've said it 100 times and I'll say it 100 times more. You do not need the flashiest graphics or the craziest cinematics to make a good game. Games do not have to be 100-hour epics. Every year, developers, especially indie developers, try something new. They come up with new mechanics and new concepts to give you, the player, a new take on gaming. It's not easy to do. Many devs try it and most of them bomb. But when they do get it right, it makes for some of gaming's most memorable gameplay. And I fucking love that shit when they get it right. So the first category is 2022's best games for unique gameplay. Cursed to Golf. This shit is brilliant. It's a roguelike game in which you've been banished to the depths of hell and the only way out is golf. Which makes sense really, because growing up the only thing my dad would watch on TV was golf, and that was fucking hell as well. It's a 2D game that takes precision accuracy to the next level. It's actually really fucking tough. You'll have a deck of single-use cards that will give you buffs and skills to help you complete a haul, but you have to use them sparingly because the further you get, the more you're going to need them. A little to the left. Did you play Unpacking last year? Unpacking was genuinely one of the best things to come out of 2021. Unpacking was an item organisation game, and a little to the left is going to scratch that exact same itch. You organise stuff, you tidy things up, and you put them in order. There's a ton of levels, and you can complete many of them in different ways. There's also a cat that fucks up your shit. It's just a super chill time, and one that you'll find yourself wasting. What? What do you want?
Can you pet the cat?
Yes, you can pet the cat. Sifu. So if there's any game in this category that you're likely to have heard of, it's this one. It came out to a pretty decent amount of hype and it didn't crash and burn, which is becoming an increasingly rare trait in hyped video games these days. So yeah, as you can see, it's a martial arts fighting game, which on the surface doesn't sound really unique, but the mechanic that sets it apart from others like it is the fact that when you die, you come back older. But the older you get, the better at martial arts you become. However, the older you get, the less health you have. So it's this payoff between being able to hit harder, but also being easier to beat. It sounds a simple mechanic, but in the context of the game, it really does become an exceptionally intuitive part of the experience. Save room. Okay, this one's gonna be a hard sell. So you know on Resident Evil games, the really fucking annoying inventory management system, where you have to sort your shit out and arrange it based on the number of blocks that you have available. Well, save room is that, the whole fucking game. But trust me, it's fucking mindless, addictive fun. Each level you get a certain amount of inventory space and a certain amount of items, and you've got to fit them all in. It's that fucking simple, but it's genuinely a lot of fun and so addictive once you start playing it. If you enjoy puzzle games, you are gonna love this game and it will test your brain for sure. Not for Broadcast. Not for Broadcast is wild. It's a choose your own adventure narrative type game where you play as a janitor turned director in charge of running the nightly news broadcast. So you're in charge of running ads, choosing cameras, working sound, you can pick which stories to run, all of which impact the continued narrative of the game. In between broadcasts you go home to your family, which carries its own narrative and actually affects the narrative on the news. But that's as much as I'll say about that. I'm not going to spoil it because you just need to play it. You just need to see how these things intertwine. It's actually really genius. The game is hilarious, dark and thought-provoking, all rolled into one of this year's most unique gaming experiences. Okay, the winner of 2022's most unique gameplay, Save Room. Honestly, nowadays, try so hard to push the boundaries on anything, and sometimes we just miss how a really simple concept can actually be so intuitive and so addictive, and that is exactly what Save Room is. And all 5 games on this list deserve your time for different reasons, but Save Room is the one that surprisingly will hold your attention the most. Once you start, you just can't fucking stop, and I don't even know why. It's a full game of the most frustrating part of the Resident Evil games. Anyway, trust me, you're gonna love it. Okay, next up we're looking at couch co-op games, a dwindling art form which I'm keen to keep alive. Multiplayer games have almost exclusively moved online now, and that's great, I love that, but the couch co-op game is an important part of gaming history. These are the games that you remember from sleepovers around at your friends' houses or games with your significant other. They are nostalgia in video game form. Not only that, but they demand a certain type of gameplay that when done right provide moments of pure satisfaction and hysterical laughter. I mean, last year's Game of the Year was a fucking couch co-op game, yet I feel like hardly anyone appreciates their value anymore. Anyway, here are my picks for 2022's best couch co-op games. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. It's brilliant. It's basic, simplistic, but awesome nonetheless. If you ever played and enjoyed the absolute classic that is Turtles in Time, then this is the one for you. The game's modernised just enough to bring it into the present, like mechanically, whilst maintaining the nostalgia that made the older Turtle games so much fun. And trust me, this game is built on nostalgia. It's still fun if you weren't a Turtles fan, but if you were, it really steps it up a level. Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. The Lego games are always a bit of mild fun. They don't occupy too much brain space, they're just the epitome of easygoing games. And the Skywalker Saga is no different, except this one is probably the best Lego game that they've ever made. Packed to the brim with content, and as you might have guessed from it featuring on this list, you can play the whole game in local co-op mode. Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. Now, I ain't a huge fan of the Borderlands games. Don't get me wrong, I don't think they're terrible games or anything, but it's just the looter shooter thing doesn't really grip me all that much. So why then have I been so intrigued with this Borderlands spin-off? Well, it's the fantasy element. It's the addition of magic and the elemental weapons, the locations and the enemies. I don't know, they've just changed things. And the amount of full AAA style games that you can play on split screen dwindles every year. They are few and far between, and devs just don't include it as an option anymore. But Tiny Tina's Wonderlands offers you exactly that, and I love that Gearbox keep including this feature to their games, and I hope they don't stop anytime soon. Nobody saves the world. This game is a blast, solo or with a friend, but as with most things, it's much better with friends. It's just a really fun game where you play as nobody and you have a magic wand, original, that allows you to take on different forms. Each form has a different play style, so there's plenty of variety to the gameplay. It's just a lot of fun with an enjoyable story and procedurally generated dungeons, and you can play the whole thing with pals locally. Wonderful. The winner, 2022's best couch co-op game, Nobody Saves the World. Trust me, it's a wonderful experience, it's hilarious, and most importantly, it's just undeniable fun. Next up, we're taking a look at 2022's most underrated games because, well, it's becoming an epidemic. The problem is that back in the good old days of entirely physical releases, everything was just there on the shelf. Yes, games flew under the radar, but it was nobody's fault but your own, because every time you stepped into your favourite video game store, the game that you missed had been staring back at you all fucking year, longing to be bought. Today though, buying games is a lot more complicated. Firstly, in 2021, over 70% of video game sales were made digitally. And since it costs a shitload of money to print and distribute physical games, more and more devs are opting to release games digitally. It's a smart move, don't get me wrong. I completely understand it from a business point of view. Here's the thing though, the fickle nature of the current video game market paired with the digital revolution means that unlike the video game stores of old, the one-stop shop for all things gaming, today's digital market is anything but. Certain games are only available on certain consoles or only available on certain distributors if you buy them on PC, meaning in order to see the entirety of what's out there and how much it's going to cost you, you're going to have to troll through multiple different online stores. And with more and more games flooding these stores every year, it's getting easier and easier to miss out on some great experiences. I've got a separate video in the works with a bunch of my picks of underrated games that you may have missed in recent years, but specifically for 2022, here's my list of the best underrated games. Shadow Warrior 3. I've played a few games by Flying Wild Hog this year, Shadow Warrior 3 being one of them, and I've figured out Flying Wild Hog's speciality. They make modern versions of PS3 and Xbox 360 games. And no, I'm not talking about remasters or remakes, I'm talking about the lost art of the bargain bin game. A game that looks and plays like a AAA title, but it's smaller, it's linear, it's basic in concept. These types of games were a dime a dozen back in the 360 area, but the benchmark for games in recent years has kind of pushed this sort of thing into video game history. Anyone with the budget to make big games are either trying to keep up with the open world Mavericks or the 40+ hour epics, or creating multiplayer service-based games. All except Flying Wild Hog. They shot out Shadow Warrior 3 early in 2022 and it's fucking awesome. It's just pure chaotic action. It's completely over the top and it'll take you only about 10 hours to get through the game, but it's 10 hours packed with undeniable fun. And if you are planning on playing it, I did do a video earlier in the year that you can watch here, and that breaks down all the different enemy types that you'll come across. Potionomics. It's a simple enough concept, but the gameplay is surprisingly complex. You play as a young witch that's taken over her uncle's potion shop. Unfortunately, you've also inherited your uncle's debt. Type bastard. So I'd need a full video to describe the complex nature of gameplay here, but simply put, you make potions and you sell them at the shop. You have to collect ingredients, and you can do this by exploring the town you live in, making friends with the locals, and hiring heroes to go out on expeditions to collect resources. It's a shop management sim meets deck builder meets potion brewer. That's not really a genre, but you brew potions. There's a lot to it, but honestly it's a fantastic game brimming with life and amazing animations. Rollerdrome. Imagine Tony Hawk's but on roller skates with guns. It sounds wacky, and it fucking is. I don't know why this one fell under my radar. Maybe it's the art style or how the gameplay looks, but it took me a while to play this one because, I don't know, just by looking at it, I assumed it was some roller derby style battle royale multiplayer game or something. But no, this is a single player game with a story mode and levels, and it's fucking fun. Really, really fun. What more is there to say than that? Evil West. Flying Wild Hog strikes again. Not unlike Shadow Warrior 3, this is a really fun linear experience that's just nothing but enjoyable for the entirety of its short, by modern day standards, campaign. But it looks great, it doesn't take itself seriously, and it plays really, really nicely. But again, nobody gives a fuck. The best part about these games, by the way, is that they are self-aware of what they're creating. They know that they're not as packed with content as AAA titles, and therefore they launch at £35, cheaper than a standard AAA game. And guess what else? Both Shadow Warrior 3 and Evil West did get physical releases, so yeah, it's your fault that you missed this one. This one has been staring back at you from the shelf in the dwindling video games section in Asda that you spent countless hours in over 2022, whilst your wife spent hours in the ever-growing cushion section. Is the cushion industry bigger than the gaming industry? Tinykin. If you grew up in the PS2 3D platforming collectathon era, you're going to feel right at home playing Tinykin. It's just so charming, and I don't know what it is about games where you shrink and explore regular sized worlds from a tiny perspective, but it's all I wanted as a kid. I loved games that did that sort of thing, and this is no different. Tinykin is another one that deserves much, much more attention than it's got, which is pretty much none. So yeah, give it a shot. It's brilliant. And the winner, 2022's most underrated game, Evil West. Praise be to Flying Wild Hog's incessant refusal to move into the modern era like everyone else. Long may it continue. Evil West is over-the-top action that plays like 1 part third-person shooter and 2 parts modern God of War style combat, all bundled into a neat little 10-hour adventure. Keep 'em coming. Anyway, that's enough positivity. It's time to look at this year's new category. The shameless greed category, the money-hungry reek pig category, the literal daylight robbery category. The games that dropped this year that took things just a touch too far, that tipped them over the edge of being an actual video game and turned them into a colourful, playable scam. Whatever the reason, if the game made it on this list, it's because greed was allowed to trump the art of making a video game. Diablo Immortal. Remember when Diablo Immortal was announced? We all thought we were getting a new Diablo game. Then it turned out to be a fucking mobile game. Diablo Immortal began its life shrouded in disappointment. Now, I don't usually include mobile games on this list, I don't play them, but Diablo Immortal was actually released this year on the PC.
We don't have any plans at the moment to do PC.
The big problem with Diablo Immortal is the sheer level of monetization in the game. And not only that, it's the absolutely seedy way that this monetization works. The game claims to be a free-to-play title, but none of the decent gear is available to non-paying players. And estimates of how long it would take to grind out the game to get that sort of gear is well into the decades. Yes, decades. But it gets better, or worse. Yeah, worse. So you can buy gear and items like any pay-to-win model, but also when you pay for better loot, what you're actually doing is paying $25 a time for a chance, a chance, to upgrade loot collected at the end of a run. It's fucking ludicrous. So much so that the game has actually been banned in multiple countries because the loot system is actually considered as gambling. And they're right. It is. Sonic Origins. I ain't gonna waffle on about this one too much because I already did a video this year on my distaste for the rollout of this game, so you can watch that here if you want to kind of get the full picture on that. But basically, Sonic Origins is a remake of Sonic 1, 2, 3 and Sonic and Knuckles. These games are not hard to play. They've been ported and ported and ported since time began. You can even play these games on browsers, on websites. Yet they rolled out this game with a bunch of different versions, with the standard edition starting at $40, the deluxe edition at $50, plus 3 add-ons, all at like $10 a pop. It was just completely shameless. In order to unlock all the content on this thing that was just barely a remake anyway, would have cost you like $70, and that's for 3 games that are like 30 years old now. And the additional paid content was just nonsense. Nonsense that had no right to be paid for, like an animated start screen or fucking alternative music. Stinks. Hate it. Overwatch 2. What makes this so fucked up is how Overwatch 1 was one of the last vestiges of a good, honest game of this type. You know, team-based shooting games have pretty much all left the nest now and are no longer just games that you pay for and get the game. They've all moved into this like service model, battle pass model, whatever. But Overwatch 1, yeah, it had microtransactions if you wanted to spend your money, but you know what? You paid for the game and you got everything. The loot box system was awesome, and the in-game currency allowed you to purchase any skins and cosmetics that you wanted with a completely fair and acceptable amount of playing. No grinding, just enjoying the game as it was intended. Then Overwatch 2 comes out this year, and aside from all the gameplay elements that have been fucked with, the game's model has finally changed to the Battle Pass system, the microtransaction system. It's free to play, but new characters and all their cosmetics are locked behind paywalls, not to mention all the previous skins that were available with Overwatch 1 currency are now locked behind paywalls as well. Now let's take Kiriko for example, one of the new characters for Overwatch 2. Let's say you want to unlock Kiriko, the character, and let's say you want to unlock all the cosmetics that you can get for Kiriko. So without the paid battle pass, it's gonna take you 50 hours of gameplay just to unlock the character. I mean, that's a lot. It's annoying, but it's not the worst. But if you want to unlock all the cosmetics as well, 5 years. 5 years of gameplay. That's not including sleeps. That's 5 years of gameplay. It's bullshit. And I hear you crying out, why don't you just play Overwatch 1 then? Why don't you just stop complaining about Overwatch 2 and just keep playing Overwatch 1? Well, in what I think is the most criminally overlooked thing in gaming history, they just deleted it. It's gone. It doesn't exist anymore, just Overwatch 2. So the game that I paid physical money for in 2015 literally doesn't exist anymore. Chocobo GP. Now I'm sounding off with a lot of the same shit here, but what pains me most about Chocobo GP is that it was actually a really fun kart game. Let's be honest, all kart games live in the shadow of Mario Kart 8. It's true. But you know what? Chocobo GP gave it a really good go. I loved it. The thing that fucked me off though is I played a review copy of this game. In this copy, they had actively left out the microtransaction section so that reviewers would review the game without knowing that microtransactions were going to be included. I was a little bit alarmed by the roster of characters as well though, but I assumed that they would just be coming to the game in waves. Well, when the game dropped, an update was made available featuring the characters Cloud and Squall. You know, arguably the two most iconic characters in Final Fantasy history. And of course, you had to pay for it. Fuck off. Gran Turismo 7. Not a game I played because it's just not my thing. Although I do have some friends who played it, and for racing sim fanatics, this really is supposed to be the creme de la creme. Fans waited a fucking decade for this game, and as it turned out, it was another scenario of grinding an obscene amount of hours to get the good stuff. If you want the best cars, you've got to spend fucking hours and hours and hours grinding the same course over and over again. Just complete monotony. Or of course, you can pay for them with real money. What really fucking pisses me off about this one is that it's a PS5 exclusive game, meaning this game costs you $70 at launch. $70. And they still fucking bottleneck players into paying more money. It's fucking criminal. They paid $70 to play the game. Just give them the fucking game. Anyway, the winner, or loser, I guess, Overwatch 2. And I'll tell you why. It's not only for the reasons that I talked about a few minutes ago, but the fact that I am one of its victims. All the other games in this list, I really couldn't give a shit about. I don't play them regularly, and I never spent a dime on them. Overwatch 2 though, I'm all in. I loved Overwatch. I loved Overwatch 1. And for that reason, even with all its shortcomings, I can't stop playing Overwatch 2. So here I am, spending my hard-earned cash on a subpar experience that just a few short months ago I had for free. And it was better. Please fix it, Blizzard. Alright, it's time. You know I fucking love indies. Indie games are the boiling pot for video game innovation. The place where developers aren't afraid to try something new. Be that with a gameplay mechanic, the art style, the narrative, or the graphics. Whatever it may be, when it hits, it hits. So here we go. 2022's best indie game. This list has the most nominees of any of the categories because I played so many good indie games this year, and it was pretty tough to actually whittle it down to this amount, but there's a little bit of crossover as well, so I'll start with the games that we've already talked about. Tinykin. I spoke about this earlier. There's not much more to say about it. It's a lot of fun, and it's a great homage to PS2 era collectathons. Decent 3D platformers are hard to come by these days unless they're made by Nintendo, but Tinykin did a really good job. Nobody saves the world. Remember earlier when I said this and everything was better with friends? That was a lie. Who socializes anymore? It's so pre-pandemic. Genuinely though, whilst Nobody Saves the World is a great co-op experience, it's also just as an amazing game solo. And of course, if you're playing it solo, you can play it at your own pace. Nightmare Reaper. Honestly, I don't know why more people aren't talking about this game. It's fucking awesome. It's a classic boomer shooter mixed in with roguelike elements, and it's just frenetic fun. I did actually review it earlier in the year on an Indie Smash or Pass vid, so you can check that out here if you want to see more about it. Neon White. Okay, this game, it doesn't do it justice by me just showing you it. It's one of those games that is literally all about playing it. But trust me, you'll be hard pressed not to find this on any indie game of the year list. It's all about the gameplay. The graphics, meh. The story, meh. The story's the weebiest thing ever, but the gameplay, so fucking fun. Fast-paced action platforming, run and gun goodness, so addictive and so much replayability. Cult of the Lamb. This is a special game. Think Hades style roguelike dungeon crawling mixed with Animal Crossing style base building and topped off with sim management. It's such a strange mix of genres, but it all clicks so well in Cult of the Lamb. I did a written review of this game over on New Game Network, and obviously that meant I played it prior to its release. I think this just caught everybody off guard, so much so that I really had to push back on resistance from the editorial team, who didn't want me to publish this review with as high a score as I'd given the game. But I was like, no, trust me, this shit is as good as I say it is. Ollie Ollie World. The Ollie Ollie series is one that I've completely ignored until now. I've seen it about, but it always gave me mobile game energy, and I just never gave the games a chance. This year though, we got Ollie Ollie World, and with a new makeover, I was drawn in. Rather than the 2D skating game I assumed it was going to be, this actually plays out more like a platformer just on wheels. Kind of like a full game of the kart levels in Donkey Kong. You know you fucking love those levels. Yeah, Ollie Ollie World has more finesse and variation. It's just so much fun, and one that really, really surprised me. Stray. Wow. Just wow. A beautiful, thought-provoking, emotion-wrenching adventure, especially if you love cats. What makes Stray so impressive is that this was Indie Studios Blue 12's first ever game. The graphics are beautiful, the world and lore is just enthralling. It has that thing that all the best video games have, where it gives you false freedom, yet really it wants you to complete things in a roundabout way. And as you discover new things, you get those eureka moments where you realise, oh, I can use that thing to unlock that thing, or this was the thing that NPC was asking for. It's just really, really brilliantly made. Tunic. When people try and describe new games, like upwards of 80% of them, you will either hear the word Dark Souls or Zelda. This is Tunic. It's both. It's Zelda's adventuring, puzzle solving and dungeoning, and Dark Souls style combat and boss fights. Only if the bosses in Dark Souls were cute. But still, the best bit about Tunic is the game manual mechanic, whereby you fill a manual unlocking lore that serves as a guide to the game. I'm not going to go into it too much because it kind of spoils it, but just play it. It's brilliant. It's a brilliant mechanic and it's really intuitive, and the game is just great. Okay, the winner. But before I announce the winner, I just want to say that like 3 or 4 of these games could have taken the top spot easily. This was a really, really difficult one for me to pick. So I just want to give it up for indie developers. Just fucking keep doing what you're doing. Okay, the winner then. Cult of the Lamb. Absolutely not got the credit it deserves in this year's official Game Awards. It's as bravely unique as it is immensely addictive, juxtaposing dark and sinister themes with cute and endearing gameplay that will satisfy every gamer's need for both action and companionship. Quality stuff. Okay, we're almost there. It's time for the big two. 2022's worst game of the year and 2022's best game of the year. The creme de la creme and the creamy, mouldy turds. So let's start with those. Babylon's Fall. Games as a service. The game model no one ever asks for and no one ever wants. So when you already got off on the wrong foot with consumers, here's a tip for you. Don't make a game where literally everything is wrong with it. The gameplay was supposed to be based on the Nier Automata combat, but played like a turd. The game was supposed to be a game that never ended, but it literally never began. It was supposed to be an online-only co-op game that literally nobody played. Gameplay and loot was just so repetitive and reused, like literally. Assets were found to be borrowed from Final Fantasy XIV, the exact same assets. It was painfully generic and with no meaningful progression, and jacked to the brim with monetization. The story was bland, and if somehow you could look past all of this, you literally cannot look past how bad it looks. With its weird fucking oil painting art style, it was meant to be an imaginative aesthetic that instead just looked like low poly, low res graphics. It looks like a AAA game with brilliant graphics that's been ported to the Switch. But it wasn't. This is just how it looks. The final nail in the coffin, it launched the same day as Elden Ring. Real smart work there, Square. Really smart. Crossfire X. Oh man, this piece of shit. I'm sure that this game was in development for long. Like, I can barely find any intel on it. The internet seems to have purged any information of it. But I remember when this thing's announced, it was like the COD killer. It was going to be fantastic. It was South Korea's beloved Crossfire, but modernised and developed for a Western audience with a campaign built by Remedy Entertainment. You know, the people behind Max Payne and fucking Control. Really good games. Then they fart out this piece of shit. Honestly, it's just like FPS games, especially ones like this, like military style sims. They're a dying breed. And the ones that do manage to succeed are ones that are looking to push boundaries and do new things. Crossfire X is just so fucking horizontal, it hurts. The AI are all fucking idiots. It's just so fucking bad. Everything about it is lazy. Remedy absolutely snatched the bag with this one. They just did the bare minimum that they needed to do and then fucked off with the cash. But ignoring the single player mode, the online mode, in the East it's supposed to be the CSGO alternative. Come on. The gunplay feels bad, the controls are bad, the UI is bad, and look at this. This is wet work from Modern Warfare, is it not? They've literally just lifted the motherfucking map. In Nightmare. More than anything with this one, I was just really fucking disappointed. I was absolutely sucked in by the trailers of this game. I was getting Little Nightmares but top-down vibes. Creepy but cute with a fantastic art style and a few jump scares along the way. Nope, it's none of that. Put it as basic as I can. It's fucking boring. Really, really fucking boring. The gameplay tropes are used over and over and over again, and the loop is just tiresome. On top of that, some of the puzzles are just unnecessarily hard, but not in a good way. Like, I love a challenging puzzle. These aren't challenging, they're just stupid. The story beats in the game are so fucking few and far between, it's really hard to understand what's actually going on. And when you do land back on the same page as the narrative, some of it is just like overly dark. There's nothing wrong with doing that. There's nothing wrong with a dark narrative, but it just feels so jarring when compared to the game's visuals and intended playstyles. It's in this weird, like, grey area where the story is so dark that it's clearly not for children, but the gameplay is so bland and simplistic that any adult that plays it is just going to get bored instantly. It's just not enjoyable. Dynasty Warriors 9. What the fuck is this? Dynasty Warriors should need no introduction. It's a beloved franchise that's been going forever. And here's the thing, Dynasty Warriors is known exclusively as the Dons, the pioneers of horde combat. Massive scale battles where you take on hundreds of enemies at a time. Well, with Dynasty Warriors 9, they decided to take that winning formula and go open world with it. Except what they did is they made a fucking massive open world and fucking put nothing in it. And also, it looks like they took the amount of enemies that would be in a couple of regular, tight, smaller stages of the old Dynasty Warriors games and spread them out over this massive, barren map like a tiny slither of butter on the world's biggest slice of toast. What makes me most mad about this is that they recently made Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. That's Dynasty Warriors but in the Zelda universe, and it was pretty fucking awesome. But it's like they put all the effort into that spin-off and they've taken a massive fucking dump all over the main franchise. Nice work. Gungrave Gore. I'm honestly perplexed by this sequel. Completely perplexed. For those of you unaware, Gungrave and Gungrave Overdose were two games that came out in the early 2000s for the PlayStation 2. You may be thinking, why have I never heard of these games? Well, that would be because they weren't very memorable, or very popular, or received well by critics. So it was just surprising to see a reboot of this franchise and a sequel drop this year. The thing is, you know when you see reboots and you hear people say, I hope they keep the same charm as the originals, you know, I hope that they stick with the charm that made the original games good. Well, this is a masterclass in that, or really a disaster class. This game doesn't really look much better than its PS2 predecessors. It looks like shit. If you were hoping that gameplay would be better, no. It plays like a clunky PS2 game as well. It's honestly like the game was made the year after the last one came out. So bad. Okay, so what was 2022's worst game of the year? You all knew it was coming. Babylon's Fall. Just a shit show. This online-only multiplayer co-op game peaked at less than 1,200 players, and by 4 months after its launch, it was peaking at just 64 players. Yes, 64 players. Not even enough to fill one of its servers, leaving the areas literally desolate. Despite all Platinum Games' promises to support the game and make it a better experience, just 6 months after its release, they announced the closure of its servers, set to be closed in February 2023. See ya. Alright, it's time for 2022's Game of the Year. So before we look at the nominees, I just want to say, look, I ain't gonna waste your time. This year we had some fucking awesome games, many of which in an ordinary year would be considered Game of the Year contenders. But this year we were lucky enough to get not one, but 2 games that will literally be remembered as 2 of the best games in gaming history. Forever. So before we get into those 2, I do want to do some quick honorary mentions for games that I believe ordinarily would have been Game of the Year contenders, but that I've chose to not include in the running this year, because what's the point? Let's get into the nominees for 2022's Video Game Therapy Game of the Year. Elden Ring. This game is as close to perfect as a game gets for sheer open world create your own adventure. Yes, there is a story to follow, but this game will do next to nothing to hold your hand and carry you through it. You'll be thrown into the world, and from then on, it's on you. But trust me, whilst daunting at first, this is one of the absolute best bits about the game. Yeah, it might take newcomers to Souls games a few hours in the first area to get to grips with the way the game plays, but once the game sinks its teeth into you, it won't let go. The map, it's like nothing I've ever seen in any game before. I remember being a kid and playing games and imagine what wonders would lay beyond doors and walls that you couldn't go through. Elden Ring literally takes that brain itch and devours it. The world is fucking massive, and literally every few steps there's something to explore, find or fight. Every corner reveals new areas, and there are literally huge swaths of map that you could completely miss, each one with hours and hours and hours of content. The combat is the most polished from any FromSoft game, and the autonomy given to players to create a build is sublime. This game will be remembered for a long time to come. God of War Ragnarok. After God of War 2018 and the news that Cory Barlog wouldn't be directing its sequel, it was hard to believe that Sony Santa Monica would ever be able to reach the heights of a game as good as God of War 2018. But even a sequel 50% as good would have been an incredibly amazing game. But I was wrong. Ragnarok is better than its predecessor in just about every single way. It's bigger in every single way. The combat, the world, the lore, the enemies, the story, everything. Ragnarok is as close as I think I've ever seen to the perfect game in terms of balancing all its elements. This game's going to grip you from start to finish and even keep you gripped long after the credits have rolled. I can't give you any spoilers, but just know that the story here will blow you away and even leave you with some questions and excitement about what's next for the franchise. The combat is the most satisfying of any game I've ever played, and when played on harder difficulties, it feels like every fight is so important, which it is in context of the game's narrative. So the way this translates into gameplay is nothing short of genius. So we're here, the winner of Video Game Therapy's Game of the Year for 2022, Waifu Impact. I'm joking. It's God of War. Of course it is. It was always going to be God of War.